Okay guys, now that we have completed our pass creation, we are getting closer and closer to the creative part of this tutorial. However, we still have to prepare a few things in order to work without technical distractions. Don't worry though, we go through this as quickly as possible. Now as you can see here, I've put everything into underlay boxes. These boxes represent the different tasks of this flow. This box here is for the pre-processing and color corrections. This box here is where we combine all our passes. And in the last box, we're going to do the post-process or finishing touches. And at the end, there would be the saver. We are going to continue our wireless workflow. Every section starts with a wireless node and ends with an output node, which delivers all the data from one box to the wireless nodes of the next box. Let's set up our wireless connections. You want to grab a copy of those two nodes and paste them in here. We have our line 1 here and this is line 2. So connect line 1 to this out node and rename it line 1 out. As you can see, because we copied those two nodes together, this wireless node automatically adopts the name of the related output node. Now I will hit pause and rename all wireless nodes accordingly. Okay, I have renamed all my wireless connections. Let's go through them from the top to the bottom to make sure you have the correct names so it's easier to follow the rest of the tutorial. Okay, from the top to the bottom. First, we have line 1, followed by line 2. Next is reflect out, followed by shadows out, followed by the tech passes. Then we have the fake image-based lighting pass, then the background, and finally the backscatter. Now here, for the sake of order, let's bring the background to the bottom. So let's get started with our pre-process and color correct section. Go to line 2 and drop in a Boolean tool. For line 1, we're going to use a brightness contrast and set the gain to 5, the lows to 0.34, and the highs to 0.598. Now, whenever you deal with these sliders here, you have to be careful. If you turn on the 3D histogram, you can see that we have introduced negative or minus values here, and also values that go above 1. Now, these values here are actually welcome, since this is actually the advantage of the 16-bit float workflow. But negative values will in many cases cause problems. To avoid these negative values, just check the clip blacks inside the brightness contrast. And as you can see, the blacks get clamped to 0. Next, add a soft glow. For the soft glow, we use a gain of 2.7 and the size of 5.98. One thing you have to pay attention now is, if we add this to the line 2 and view the alpha by hitting A, it seems that the alpha became brighter. Now this is because the glow we applied also applies to the alpha. As you can see, apply to alpha is checked here. If you don't want that, you can either uncheck this or inside the channel boolean, go into the alpha slot and press D for do nothing. Next, we're going to add a output node and rename it to line CC. And let's move to the next pass. For the reflection pass, we grab this output node, copy and paste it here and rename it reflect CC, and move it all the way to the right. Okay, now there's one technical thing we have to do for all crystal passes which have an alpha. We have to do the so-called alpha divide. Now, to explain to you what alpha divide is from a technical point of view would take too much time. I might do this in a quickie. But basically what happens is we are removing all middle values from the alpha so that when we process our divided image, we won't change the alpha, and therefore we make sure that nothing happens to our edges. To divide your image, use a Boolean tool, rename it to divide, and in the operation dropdown, choose divide. For the red, green and blue channel, choose alpha. Now if you view the alpha, you can see what actually happens. We're going to do this for all our passes. Grab the whole line here and paste it in here. Let's rename it to Shadow CC. For the technical pass, we have to do something different. For now, paste it in and move it all the way to the right. Rename this to Tag Pass CC. So why does it work different here? Now here we are going to actually create the ambient occlusion. For the ambient occlusion to work, we need a camera. So let's go over here and grab an instance of our camera and drop it in here. Select the ambient occlusion node and reduce the number of the samples to speed things up. Hit C to go back to the RGB channels. Now let's change the ambient occlusion to sphere and set the radius to 0.23, the lift to 0.35, and the gamma to 0.295. Now if you look closely, you can see that something is wrong with the edges here. Don't get confused, you can't fix this problem by activating the super sampling. It won't fix this problem. But there's a solution to this. First, let's go back to the world sphere that we've created earlier for the occlusion pass. We're going to do a few things here. In the controls, go to visibility dropdown and uncheck the ignore transparent pixel option. Then go over to the material tab and reduce the opacity to 0. And let's go back to our ambient occlusion again. Add a blur, view it and set it to 0.5. Next, add a boolean. And hook in any pass that has a multiplied alpha, we take one close by, into the mask slot of the channel boolean, this blue one here. Drop a mask right onto this link. Now view the channel boolean, nothing happens. Go to the operation and choose clear. Now we are clearing out everything that is not masked. We actually want to invert this mask. So go into the mask and check invert. Now if you have a closer look at the edges again, you can see we have a very clean result here. We want to divide this one as well. Okay, let's move to the next pass, the image-based lighting pass. Here we do the same. Move it back here and rename this accordingly. Same for this one. And for the background, we don't need it, so just drop in a output node and rename it. And this is the back. Oh, actually, this is the backscatter. So we have basically finished the technical preparation. So let's start our corrections on the backscatter pass. View it and add a blur and uncheck the alpha. Add a color correction node. Let's change the saturation to 0.32 and the gain to 0.47. And for that master gain, we choose 10. Now at this point, I decided to improve a few things. Let's just make a few quick changes here. The first thing we change is the light. Select the light, view the merge, and let's turn off the grid here. So change the decay type of our light to quadric. This will give us a much more realistic fall off. Set the decay rate to 0.03 and try to find a nice position for your light. Another important thing. For this backscatter pass, I want to change the smoothing angles of the replace normals node. At the moment it's set to 60. Set it to 100. It will give us a smoother result, which looks much more like scattering. We want to copy this here over and drag it into the wireless node and rename it to InReflectCC because it comes from the color correct section. And do this for all other passes as well. Just copy it out here and replace the out with CC. Same goes for the tag passes. Actually, this time this pass becomes the Ambient Occlusion pass. And here as well, rename it in SSAOCC. Let's not forget the line here. Line CC. Move this down here, and since we are going to use this with the background, we're going to move this down to the background. Okay, great. So let's start with the combining of our passes. We start with the image-based lighting pass. We add a merge and grab the Ambient Occlusion pass. Hook it into the merge. We set the blend mode to soft light and bring the gain to 0.57. Go over to the radioactive tab and turn off the alpha. Next, add a boolean. Set the operation to add and the alpha to do nothing. Now we're going to need 3 more copies of this. Now the next pass we're going to use is the shadow pass. Drop it into the viewer and get a boolean. We're going to multiply it with our ambient occlusion. Set the operation to multiply and the alpha to do nothing. Now at this point I want to make the shadows a bit darker. So let's go back to our light. Here it is. Very organized. So select the light and in the shadow dropdown, set the density to 0.75. Yeah, that looks much better. So let's go back to our boolean and let's hook this into the next boolean and view it. Great. Next is the backscatter pass. Move it over, hook it in, view it, bang. Now we're going to adjust this a bit. Append the brightness contrast and set the gain to 0.3. You might want to clip the whites for this one. Next pass. Get the reflect pass now, and yeah, I want to improve this also. Hook it into the boolean tool and let's go back to our reflect material. Now remember the blend material, the one which passes the color, specular and opacity attributes to the reflect material? No? Nah, of course you do. Now let's reduce the opacity to 0. So we see the reflections of the backside. I think it looks much cooler like that, so let's keep that. Okay, this is our light wrap. So let's rename this light wrap. And add a boolean, which we will use to multiply our alpha back. We're going to do this in a minute. And then followed by a merge, which we will use to merge the background. However, this belongs into the foreground now. Okay, great. Now we're going to do the magic here. For this backscatter here, at the moment, I reduce the gain for the whole image. But we want to kick some ass. So let's use a mask derived from the ambient occlusion. View it and set it to red. Set the lows to 0.5 and the highs to 0.335. Okay, we're going to use this mask with this brightness contrast here. Let's view it and hook in the mask. Now you see we get this cool look here, exactly what we want. So let's create a router here and move it out of the way. You can place it the way you like. Now at this point, let's create our masks for our light wrap. Branch out here. Now we have exactly the same masks. The second one we invert and we hook it into the first one. Now set the paint mode of the first mask to multiply. If we view it, we see nothing. However, as soon as we increase the softness of the second mask, we'll get our light wrap mask. Okay, this mask goes into this light wrap. Before we hook it in though, we're going to finish our background. Let's see what we have now. We have our image-based lighting. We apply the ambient occlusion. And then we use a combination of our ambient occlusion with the shadow pass, and we add this. And next we add the backscatter and the reflection. Very cool. Okay, now let's get down to our background. Add a merge and hook in the lines. Okay, now here with the lines, I haven't set it to add yet, so let's do that now. And we are good to go. Let's view it again and add a color correction node. Set the master gain to 0.65. Next, add a fast defocus. And let's grab an output node. Let's rename it. Okay, and move this back here. Now let's drop in a ellipse mask. Set it to something like this. And let's increase the softness to 0.165 and invert it. We're going to use this for the color correction here. View the fast defocus. Lock the XY and crank it up to 8. Finally, let's set up another wireless for this background, drag it in and rename it Back Combined. Move this up to the light wrap. View the light wrap, and if we now hook in the background, it will be added on top of everything. But we want it to be only inside of the mask here. So let's use our light wrap mask. Now you can always modify this later. For now, let's hook in the background into the merge. But before I show you our merged foreground background, I want to show you our alpha divide multiply result. Now as you can see here, the alpha is still divided. Select this Boolean tool and in the operation list choose multiply and set the red, green, blue to alpha foreground. Still nothing going on here. Now that's because we need to feed the Boolean tool with an image that has the undivided or multiplied alpha. We can choose any pass straight out of the renderer. For instance, our image-based lighting pass. Grab an instance and connect it to the foreground of the Boolean. Watch closely what happens as soon as I connect it. Bang! We have perfect edges. There's nothing. You can go back to your color corrections and you can color correct and modify the shit out of this thing and your edges will always be perfect. Okay, uber cool. Let's view the merge. And let's do some modifications here. We're going to add a brightness contrast to our light wrap branch and set the gain to 0.55. Append a color correction node and change it to something like this. And finally, a blur. Let's say 11. Okay guys, great job. Time for the final round. I have put all my data from the combining section into this wireless set here, and we are going to do the post-process now. For that, let's drop in a color correction node. View it, and we're going to set a few things here. For the master tint, change to -0.464. the strength to 0.229. For the high tint, 0.168 and the strength to 0.58. Switch to the shadow group, choose blue channel, and in the gain input box, enter 1.72. Okay, cool. Next we add a merge and drop in a filter and the brightness contrast as well. Now branch into the filter and the brightness contrast to the merge. Now select the filter and select the filter type Sobel. In the brightness contrast, set the gain to 0.09 and clip the blacks. Now create a rectangle mask. View the merge, and if you look closely, we get some weird black borders here. This is caused by the filter. We can simply use a rectangle mask here to mask those borders out. Next, add a glow. Uncheck the alpha and set the glow size to 5.2 and the glow to 0.24. Change the glow color down here. We set the red to 0.36, the green to 1.07 and the blue to about 1.34. Let's compare. Next, add a vary blur. View it and change the blur type to defocus. Set the size to 2.9. Now add a ellipse mask and connect it to the green arrow, not the mask input. Adjust the size a bit, invert it and soften it out. Something like this. Next is another color correct node. This one does the trick, so try to get the values right. Set the master contrast to 0.90, the gain to 1.14, and for the brightness we use minus 0.17. Then let's go over to the green channel and set the contrast to 0.93. And in the blue channel, set the contrast to 0.69. Now go to the shadow group. And we want to adjust the saturation to 0.09. And finally, we lift the shadows a bit to 0.077. Now, whenever you modify a bunch of values and you want to just reduce the overall effect a bit, you can simply go to the radioactive tab here and reduce the blend slider to 0.5. Add a merge, set it to screen and add another one. And let's bring in a background, which we set to 16-bit float. Now change the color type to gradient and let's hook this in and set the colors to something like this. Make a copy. And this time change the gradient type to radial. And position it the way you like. Next, we use a brightness contrast to make sure that all our blacks are clipped. And finally, add a merge, a background, and a rectangle mask to create a letterbox. Now, at any time, we can always go back and do adjustments to literally everything. As long as you don't do breakouts, your whole composition is procedural and non-destructive. Usually, depending on your composition's complexity and your machine, updates you make will happen instantly. Okay, super, uber awesome. I have made a quick preview here. Let's view it, and this is what you should see now. Now, what I really like about this is those bump details here. These teeny tiny little details just do add some awesomeness to this. I don't know how to say it, but okay, you know what I mean. Now guys, I don't know what to say. After many hours of talking, planning, recording, re-recording, and again talking, I just want to shut up and I just want to read your comments and feedbacks for the next 500 years, 500 hours. And meanwhile, I'm contemplating about my next tutorial. Yeah, so my name is Vito. I'll see you soon. Until then, enjoy what you're doing. See ya.